folks. Welcome to our virtual trip to the Guzzle, leaving Shorebird space to roost. If you don't know me, I'm Becky Parker. I'm the coordinator of the Young Naturalists Club, and I'm actually going to move right over to Karen McKendry, who is our Halifax chapter lead, and she's going to introduce the super cool, fun things that we're doing today. Just a sec. All right, Karen, you can go ahead.
Thanks. So welcome everyone. So welcome returning Young Naturalist Club members. We're so glad you're here. So if you're new to Young Naturalist Club, we are just finishing our 13th year of programming. What we normally do is go out on field trips to the natural world to get to know native species and see local ecosystems and natural phenomena. However, we've had to modify our programming because of the pandemic restrictions. So today, we're trying our first ever virtual field trip, and we're so glad that you're joining us. If you're interested in our programming in the future, we take a bit of a break in the summer, but you can become a member and join up for next fall. Our programming usually runs from September to June. You can also check us out at our annual general meeting, which is coming up online, and you can always send us a message by Facebook or over email. So today, thank you for joining us for this webinar. Just a couple things to know is we have the settings so that you can't turn your camera on or you can't turn your microphone on, and that's totally fine, so don't think there's a tech problem there. But you can ask questions in the chat, and we're going to leave time at the end of the presentation for questions and for comments. So please stay tuned. We're also going to do some trivia, which you can follow along and answer with a pen and a pencil and on paper, or you can use the app Kahoot if you happen to already have that. So stick around for the trivia and listen closely because it'll help you answer the questions at the end. So today I'm delighted that JFI is here to join us. She has been doing really interesting research around a place where that's very important for shorebirds, but it's also used by recreational users who could disturb them. So she's going to tell us about her research today so that we can all become better shoregoers. So I will pass it over to her now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really thrilled to be here. Just getting my camera adjusted there. So to start out, this program is called Space to Roost, and it's a program by Birds Canada. Their logo is up there in the corner. And you can find more information about Space to Roost on Facebook. So it's facebook.com/Space to Roost. And so the work I did a thesis, a master's thesis at Dalhousie University. And it was about sharing the beaches with shorebirds in the Minas Basin of the Bay of Fundy. And one of the sites in the Minas Basin that we researched was the Guzzle. So today we're going to be taking a virtual trip to the Guzzle, as you all know. This picture that you're seeing on your screen right now is the front page of the handout we created for this program. And you can see that one of the shorebirds there is saying, "Our population has dropped by over half since the 1970s. Please give us space to rest on Bay of Fundy beaches." So that's very important. I just want to take a moment to mention all of these wonderful organizations and groups that funded our program and funded my thesis. So thank you to all of them. I'm actually going to turn my camera off now for the rest of the presentation so we can just look at the presentation, but lovely to meet you all. All right, so you can see all of the people that helped us both with funding and with expertise. So thank you to all of them. Oops, just trying to fast forward here to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. So these shorebirds migrate from their breeding grounds in the Arctic, which is the red part on the map there, all the way down to their wintering grounds in South America. And they use the Bay of Fundy as kind of a pit stop. So think about when you're on a trip and you stop at an Irving Big Stop and you want to eat and you want to rest. before you get going again on your trip. And that's how these shorebirds use the Bay of Fundy. And then after they leave, they fly 4,000 kilometers over the ocean to South America in just 3 days. And they don't swim and they don't stop. So just imagine flying 4,000 kilometers. Quite amazing. So we were looking at 4 roost sites, these pit stop sites, in the Minas Basin. So you can see on the map there with the stars, we had Evangeline Beach, the Guzzle, where we'll be focusing today, Avonport Beach, and Blue Beach. So as many of you probably know, the Bay of Fundy has the highest tides in the world, which means that at low tide, there's all this space which the birds use as their feeding grounds. And they eat tiny little mud shrimp, tiny worms, and something called biofilm, which is essentially a green slurry of decomposing organic matter. And so that's what they do at low tide. And you can see in that first picture, there's all this space for them. And then if you look at the yellow square, the small yellow square shows you where they're all sitting at high tide, because there's very little space at the Guzzle at high tide, and they all need to pack in there. And you can see in the picture in the foreground, that's all shorebirds. So that's probably about 50,000 shorebirds all packed into that tiny space, and they roost or rest from 2 hours before to 2 hours after high tide in August. And actually they're there from about mid-July to mid-September. And that's what we were observing. We were observing them at those high tide points. So as you can imagine, when they're that packed in, it gets pretty hard to differentiate which kind of bird you're looking at. So we would often ID them as a group as peeps. So peeps consist of 5 different types of shorebirds, but the main groups that we had, or the main species we had at the Guzzle were semi-palmated sandpipers. There were 70 to 90% of the flocks, which a flock is a group of shorebirds together. So 70 to 90% were semi-palmated sandpipers, which is that first bird on the left, and then semi-palmated plovers and least sandpipers. So you can kind of tell the semi-palmated plover looks quite different from the other 2, but the other 2 are quite hard to distinguish from each other when you're looking through binoculars or a scope. You'll probably notice a few differences, one being that their legs are different colors. The semi-palmated sandpiper is a bit darker in its back, and they are bigger. Least sandpipers are actually the smallest of all shorebirds. But that's very hard to distinguish when they're packed in as they were in that previous picture. So these birds stay in the Bay of Fundy for about 21 days, and during that time, they need to bulk up. They need to double their weight before they can have enough fat stores to fly those 4,000 kilometers to South America in 3 days. So it's very important that they eat enough at low tide and that they rest enough at high tide. So what is flushing and why is it bad? So flushing is when a bird or a flock of birds walks or flies away from a source of disturbance. And this is very stressful to the birds. And it also wastes their valuable energy, which they need to make it to South America. So we really want to avoid flushing the birds. We want to avoid making them walk or fly away from us when we're enjoying the beaches in Nova Scotia. So one way to remember this is our catchy little slogan, flushing is for toilets. Here's a toilet. Good, flush the toilet, that's great. Here's a shorebird. Don't flush the shorebird. So remember, when in doubt, and if you see anybody else not doing what they're supposed to, You can tell them flushing is for toilets. Okay, so what are some causes of shorebirds flushing? So one is actually other birds. The number one, there's predatory birds, and the number one predatory bird for shorebirds are peregrine falcons. And I have some pictures below. There's an adult and a juvenile peregrine falcon, and you can see there's some differences in the way they look at different stages of their lives. And these birds actually will follow the shorebirds during their migration. So they follow them all the way from the Arctic down to the Bay of Fundy. And if you're on YouTube later, there's some great videos, and I believe Becky put a video up on the Facebook page as well, of peregrine falcons hunting the shorebirds at the Guzzle. And it's quite amazing to watch, so check that out if you can. Other predatory birds are hawks, in particular northern harriers, and I have a picture of a northern harrier here as well. Non-predatory birds can also flush the birds, so other peeps, other sandpipers or plovers joining the group sometimes startles the group and they all fly off and come back to the beach. And also other birds like bald eagles and gulls, they would hunt the shorebirds if they could, but they're actually too slow. Shorebirds are very, very fast. But it's very important when you're on the sites, maybe you're fishing, for example, and if you leave your discarded bait on the site, don't take it home with you, then that attracts eagles and gulls, which can be a danger to the shorebirds. So it's important to pick those things up, and also discarded bait lines, because sometimes the shorebirds can get tangled in those fishing bait lines. So very important to pick up any trash. If you're having a picnic, pick that up, take it home with you for those reasons. So what are some other causes of shorebirds flushing? Well, people, right? We all want to be on the beaches in the summer. We want to fish. We want to photograph the birds. We want to walk on the beach. And these, we found in our study, were the top 3 reasons for shorebirds being disturbed. So it was people fishing, photographing the birds, and walking on the beach. So I mentioned about fishing, what you can do to avoid disturbing the birds. When you're photographing the birds, make sure you stay up on the dike. There's a dike that runs the length of the beach. Stay up there, don't go down to the beach. Use a zoom or telephoto lens, or if you just want to watch the birds, a great way to do it is with a scope, which is like a high-powered binocular. And then walking on the beach, make sure you're walking slowly. If you're seeing shorebirds, avoid them, choose an alternate path, continue on the dike, or choose another spot to go walking, just so we give them that space to roost. Some other things, walking dogs on the beach, make sure you keep them on a leash. We saw people driving ATVs and even cars and RVs on the beach. That, you should never drive a vehicle on the beach. Boating, if you see a big a flock of shorebirds roosting, turn off your engine, don't dock near the birds. Swimming, just avoid them. And then one thing I did want to mention is we saw this very infrequently, but we did see a few people chasing or even throwing rocks at the birds. And it's very important to never do this, because shorebirds are protected in Canada under the Migratory Birds Convention Act. And of course, we don't want to harm the birds. And if someone does, they can be fined money for harming them. So just to be aware of all those reasons and ways to help the birds. So the most numerous user group at the Guzzle are striped bass anglers, and they fish at the same time as the birds are roosting at high tide. So you can see in this picture, we've got 2 guys fishing and then all the birds roosting around them. So we saw 493 striped bass anglers over our 3-year study. And we wanted to know if they would be willing to share the beach with the birds. So we designed an online survey through different angling and fishing websites, Facebook groups, and we received 22 responses. And one of the questions we asked was, are you willing to fish only on the east and or middle beaches of the Guzzle, leaving the westernmost beach or the western and middlemost beaches for the shorebirds? And we were really surprised to see that 9 of the respondents said that they would be willing just to fish on East Beach and to leave middle and west for the shorebirds. And then we had 4 that said we can leave West Beach for the shorebirds and we'll fish on East and middle. And we had 2 people that said, well, no, we just want to fish on all 3 beaches. So we were really impressed that many people were willing, that many anglers were willing to leave space for the birds. It was very encouraging. So that's what we did. We set aside the westernmost beach at the Guzzle. You can see here that there's clearly 3 beaches. We've got East Beach on the right-hand side, Middle Beach in the middle, and then on the left we have West Beach, which is in red, and we renamed it the Shorebird Resting Beach. We also asked the anglers in the Facebook group, how could we best communicate to beach users about this dedicated shorebird resting beach at the Guzzle? And the vast majority, 18, said signage. Other people said, you know, I want face-to-face contact with people talking to me about the shorebirds. Others wanted it through social media like Facebook and Instagram, so we did start a Facebook page. Others said newspapers, so we put articles in the newspapers and in newsletters nearby. And some others said the fishing regulations book, so it's the Nova Scotia Angler's Guide. We didn't end up doing that, but I think it would be a good thing to do in future years. So the vast majority said signage, so that's what we did. We created signage. This is our sign. That was at both of our sites because we did this at both the Guzzle and Avonport Beach. So the black identifies the site as a vital rest stop for shorebirds. The yellow shows the importance of high tide rest time for the birds and how people can help. So all those ideas I had up above on a previous slide saying, you know, pick up your trash, avoid the birds, choose alternate paths when you're walking, use telephoto lenses when you're taking photos, that kind of thing. We put the map there showing the location of the Shorebird Resting Beach in red. And this is a high tide table. So this actually showed people the high tide resting times from 2 hours before to 2 hours after high tide, twice a day, every day in August. And we updated that every year. So 2016, 2017, and 2018. And then we also had this waterproof case that had our handouts in both French and English. And you saw the front page of the handout, it was our first slide there. And we also distributed these handouts at local businesses all around Grand Pre and Wolfville, which is near the Guzzle, so that local businesses could give them out to tourists in the summer. And that was great. We had a lot of interest from local businesses to get involved and to help us teach people the importance of leaving shorebird space to roost. So that was fantastic. We also made sandwich board signs, and we put these at either end of our shorebird resting beaches, one at Avonport and one at the Guzzle. And if you see in the second photo, there's a red circle. That's where the second sandwich board sign was. So it had all the same information, but it just said, it had the stop sign that said, at high tide, this beach is reserved for resting shorebirds. And this is just a voluntary request, just to give the birds that space to rest. Okay, so we observed these high tide roost sites. We observed both the birds and the beach users from 2 hours before to 2 hours after peak high tide in August in 2016, 2017, and 2018. We conducted a minimum of 9 4-hour observations per site, and we wanted to look at the numbers, types, and patterns of use of beach users and shorebird flocks. as well as the numbers, causes, and locations of disturbance. So that included both human-caused disturbance, people walking, people fishing, people dog walking, people photographing, as well as all of the disturbances by peregrine falcons and hawks, other peeps, gulls, and even sometimes we would have a disturbance and we wouldn't know the source, we wouldn't see what the reason was for the disturbance. So we put those down as unknown cause of disturbance. During this time, we also interviewed the beach users, that's me, giving out handouts on site. And overall, people were really positive about setting aside resting beaches. They thought it was overall a very good idea. And one of the questions we asked was, do you know the importance of the area to migrating shorebirds? And this increased from 47% of all the people, so we asked 17 people at the Guzzle in 2016, this question, and 47% of those, so almost half of them, knew the importance. And then in 2017, we asked 24 people, and it shot up to 88% of those people knew the importance. So that's a big increase from 2016 to 2017. And then in 2018, we asked 28 people, and just over half of them knew. So it is a drop from the 2017 year, but still an increase from the 2016 year, which leads us to believe that our methods of having the handouts and myself and other researchers on the site teaching people about the birds and the importance of the sites and having the signage did help to increase people's awareness, which is fantastic. This slide is a bit more, the next two slides are a bit more technical, so feel free to ask questions at the end if you want more clarity. But this slide talks about the changes in the hourly rate of human-caused disturbance on the Shorebird Resting Beach from 2016 to 2018. So in each year of the study, we did a different number of audit hours due to things like rain or researcher availability, that sort of thing. So in 2016, we did 24.5 hours of observation. In 2017, we did 55.5 hours. And in 2018, we did 42.5 hours. So we wanted to account for the differences in those hours. And we did. And even accounting for that, we found there was an 81% decrease in the hourly rate of humans disturbing the birds, or human-caused disturbances to the birds, from 2016 to 2017. And we also found a 72% decrease in the hourly rate of human-caused disturbances to the shorebirds from 2016 to 2018. So those were really great results because those are big drops from the 2016 year before we had done anything. Maybe I didn't actually just explain that. In 2016, we just observed the birds and didn't do anything, didn't try to ask people to avoid any beaches. But in 2017, we asked them to avoid the Shorebird Resting Beach. And again, in 2018, we asked them to avoid that. So we can see that not doing anything, there was no change, obviously, but doing something, asking them to avoid that beach, we saw these decreases. 81% and then 72%. We did see from 2017, so the first year of asking people not to use the beach, to 2018, the second year, there was a 48% increase between those 2 years. So, and we can discuss some reasons for why that was happening if you're interested after. Okay, this is the percentage of users choosing to go down to the Shorebird Resting Beach from the dike. So in 2016, as I just mentioned, there was no change, there was no intervention. We weren't asking people to do anything, we were just observing them. So you can see in the circles, you see the three circles there? 2016, the circle is half black and half gray. And the black is people going down to the beach. And the gray is people choosing to stay up on the dike, which is above the beach. So about half chose to go down to the beach and half stayed on the dike. But in 2017, we see that the vast majority chose to stay on the dike. So they saw our signs, they talked to us on the beach, they saw our handouts, and made the decision to just stay on the dike and not go down to the beach at all. So only 6.6% of all the people present went down to the beach. And then in 2018, even fewer people went down to the beach. It went all the way down to 2.1% chose to stay on the beach, and the rest of the people stayed on the dike. So that was a really fantastic result. We were excited to see that. So I just wanted to briefly mention, because I know probably many of you are very interested in the shorebirds and want to take photos, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about ethical shorebird photography. So ethical shorebird photos follow these criteria. They're taken without disturbing the birds, which means that close-up shots are taken from the dike above the beach, not going down to the beach at all, and just using a telephoto lens, so a nice long lens. So trying to get close enough with your iPhone or your smartphone just isn't going to work, because we saw it many times, people trying to get close enough with their little personal phones, and you just can't do it. The birds will flush before you get close enough to get a close-up shot. So we're just asking everyone to try to stay on the dike and take those photos with a long lens, or just observe them with your binoculars or the naked eye. Should also make sure that birds are not intentionally disturbed for flight photos. So we would sometimes see people right next to the birds and flapping their arms or whatever to get the birds to fly so that they could get in-flight shots. So we'd ask people not to do that. And also to not bait the birds, so to try to have food and lure the birds to the camera kind of thing. So these are some guidelines you can use, and you can tell friends and family the importance of following these guidelines so that the birds have that time to rest, because as we know, it's just so important for them to have that time so they can gain twice their weight and be able to fly all the way to South America. And again, if you're ever in doubt, or if anybody else is ever in doubt, remember, flushing is for toilets, not shorebirds. So many years ago, I worked for Dr. Jane Goodall. I don't know if you all know who she is, but she worked with chimpanzees in Africa. And she always talks about reasons for hope. So I'm gonna leave you all with a reason for hope, and that is that Space to Roost lives on. So we've had interest from conservation managers and biologists, both nationally and internationally, to expand this program. I've already given handouts and signage and our methods to many organizations. The handout you're seeing on the left there is one I redesigned for Nature New Brunswick. We've also had interest from Newfoundland, British Columbia, Maine. This acronym here, WHSRN, is the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network. So that's a network of sites all the way from the Arctic to South America. So we've had interest from them from sites in Georgia in the United States, New Jersey, and Panama, which is down in Central America, as well as interest from an NGO in New England. So it's very exciting to see that this project not only lives on, Birds Canada continues to do this project at the Guzzle. This will be the 5th year, but it will also be expanding to other places. So that's fantastic, that more people will be aware of the importance of leaving birds space to roost. So after this presentation, I bet you're all wondering, how can I volunteer? So what can volunteers help with? You can assist the biologist in observing the birds and the beach users and taking notes. You can help come up with new ideas to make space to roost better. You can edit the yearly tide table for the signs and handouts. You can help deliver handouts to local businesses and talk to the businesses about the importance of space to roost. And you can lead or participate in events like bird watching or yoga classes. My friend and colleague Tiffany McCulley is on the line with us today, and she'll be helping us ID birds during the trivia portion. And that's her in the third photo, teaching a free shorebird yoga class. So there's lots of things you can do to help us out with this program, and we'd love to have you. So for more information on volunteering within COVID-19 restrictions, you can contact Laura Bartlett at spacetoroost@birdscanada.org and join all these happy smiling faces of these wonderful people and helping us to help the shorebirds. So thank you all so much for joining me on this virtual trip to the Guzzle. I very much appreciate you being here. And these are all of the wonderful people that helped us fund the project and my thesis, and our project partners and people who gave us photos for this presentation. So thank you to all of them. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments you have, or to launch into the trivia. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you, Jaya. I can start us off with a question. As I know that a lot of our Young Naturalist Club members are avid citizen scientists, and I also know that it's very hard to ID shorebirds. Maybe this is a question for both Jaya and Tiffany. When you're out, if you're up on the dike at the Guzzle and you're trying to estimate numbers of birds, do you have any tips for that if you're doing some e-birding or just writing down notes for yourself? And then do you have any tips for picking out those more common species that we're more likely to see down there?
Well, maybe, Tiffany, I'll start with the question about IDing large groups of birds, and you can take the IDing question.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Let's see if I can go back to my... Here we are. Okay. Am I still sharing my screen? Can everyone see the presentation? Maybe not. Try this again. Here we go. Okay,
yeah.
Can everyone see that picture now? Yes? Okay, great. So with this picture, obviously this is quite challenging to count birds, and these are estimates, but what we would do normally is sort of set up a transect. Like, we would have a scope, which is that binocular that's really high powered, and you would look at one square of the birds and you'd estimate how many were in that square, and then you'd sort of extrapolate from there how many birds were in that square and how big is that square you're looking at within your scope lens. And then you'd just methodically move over and count, okay, and then move up and count how many squares you see. So it is an estimate, but that's generally how we did it. I don't know if Tiffany has some more suggestions.
Yeah, no, Jay, that's pretty much how I do it as well. It's really about sort of grouping the birds. So kind of estimating what a group of, say, 50 birds or 10 birds or whatever number looks like, and then sort of multiplying that across the group that you see. So it is, like you said, very much an estimate. Yeah.
And then Tiffany, I think you were
Great, good stuff. Karen, did you have any other questions for us?
I think Tiffany is going to add some tips on how to identify some of the most commonly seen shorebirds.
Yes. So yeah.
Oh, great.
So
Yeah, go ahead, Tiffany.
Yeah, sure, of course. Thank you very much. I guess my best tips for identifying shorebirds, as Jaya indicated in her presentation, there are certainly species like the least and the semi-palmated sandpiper that are very difficult to differentiate, and some that are obviously easier to identify, like the semi-palmated plover and other birds. But the important thing is to think about what we call field marks. So every species has marks that we look for, whether it's a shape of a bill or the color of the legs, or like the palmated plover here has a ring around its neck. Each species has those sort of unique things to look for. So my best advice is to get yourself a field guide for when you're going into the field. A lot of these field guides have those marks identified in them, so they can really, really help you. And then another thing I really like to do is, of course, learn the different calls of the birds. So there's a lot of amazing resources that you can check out, like Dendroica online will help you learn visual and song identifications of birds. There's a bunch of apps as well. And if you can learn those calls, then even if you're having a hard time seeing the birds out in the field in those big groups like Jay was showing you, you may be able to pick out some of those songs. Or calls, I guess we would call them.
Jay, I'm Karen here again. I have a couple questions.
Cool.
They're a little bit different. They're not
Karen, do you have any
exactly.
questions for your group that you know folks might be interested?
Yeah, I have some questions that are not exactly on the species, but more about like being a researcher and caring about the species. Like you said, in your first year of your research, you were there at the Guzzle at the beach, and you were watching the birds, and you were watching the beachgoers, and you saw beachgoers do things that flush the birds. So how did you make it through that first year where you were watching behaviors that you knew were going to be detrimental to the birds, but you didn't go up and talk to people? Like, did you keep your future work in mind? Like, what was that like internally as a researcher?
Yeah, that's a great question. That was very difficult because I did see a lot of instances of disturbance. I think it's exactly what you said. I think I was thinking about the greater good of the project as a whole. I didn't so 99% of the time I just observed. The only time I intervened was once, and it was a case of possible harm to the birds, and I was advised by that it was my place to talk to this woman. She had her two dogs off leash at one of the sites, and they were actually chasing and almost catching semi-palmated plovers. And of course, that's against the Irish River Prevention Act. So the first time she did it, and I didn't say anything. The second time I saw her again, and so I went up to her and just very, politely and calmly explained that it was important to keep her dogs on a leash because, as I just said, birds are protected. And then she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just thought I was giving the birds and the dogs some exercise." So she really didn't know. And so that was just a case of her not understanding that these birds needed to rest at high tide so that they could fly 4,000 kilometers down to South America. She had no idea about that. So that really opened my eyes to the importance of the work, because most people are not trying to harm the birds in a malicious way. They just don't know. So that's why it was so important to have education and awareness campaigns for these kinds of conservation projects, because we just can't assume that everybody knows what we know, right? But yeah, I guess to get back to your question, I was just observing. That was my role, and it is difficult, but it's very important to have a baseline for research like this. And I would be essentially throwing the results if I talked to people and got involved before the end of the baseline. So, yeah.
All right. Well, just thank you to everybody. Thanks for participating. That's fun trivia. Thank you, everyone who helped set that up. Thank you to Jaya and Tiffany for helping us learn more about shorebirds and how to be better beachgoers. And thank you all for joining on our first Young Naturalists Club virtual field trip. I hope now you'll take a moment to get outside and that the next time you're at a beach, you'll think about some of the things you learned. So thanks a lot, and we'll sign off. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.